Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. Today, we are going to be speaking about the Affiliation Manager. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending where you are. And let's begin with the session today. So a bit of an introduction. Currently, more than 25,000 affiliations are added to the registry using the Affiliation Manager, and we have over 160 members that are actively using this tool. So what we are going to cover today is affiliations and professional activities at ORCID Records. Also, what's the Affiliation Manager and how you can use it, and a couple of tips to use the Affiliation Manager successfully based on the stories that we have from other ORCID members that are currently using the tool. So before we begin, I would like to know a bit about your organization. So we are about to launch a poll to get to know you a bit better. So there we are. You should be seeing a poll right now to indicate your interest at ORCID and your interest, your organization interest. Oh, sorry, this is the incorrect one. My apologies. This is the right one. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. Hopefully you're seeing you're seeing it because I'm already seeing some answers. So the questions are: how long has your organization been an ORCID member? If you are an ORCID member, of course. If your organization has an integration, and of course, if you need some help with that integration. We are going to focus today on the Affiliation Manager, of course, but we're happy to hear your thoughts on other integrations as well, and questions that you might have. Use the Q&A functionality for that, and we will cover them at the end of the session. Leave in a couple of additional seconds. And here we are. So we have members that are with us over 2 years, recent members as well. And also, when it comes to integration, we have a mix. So we have some that already have an integration, others that are working on it, also others that don't have an integration and probably aren't working at it yet, and some that need a bit of help. So hopefully we can help you not only with this session, but also with future engagement. Just let us know. Okay, now let's begin with the part of affiliations and professional activities in ORCID Records. You probably are familiar with this distinction, but at ORCID we classify affiliations and professional activities. These are two groups. We separated these last year to make it a bit more clearer for both organizations adding data to ORCID Records and also researchers adding data themselves. Under affiliations, we consider employment, which is the formal relationship with an organization, education, the participation in an academic higher education program, qualification in a professional or vocational accreditation or certification or training program, an invited position in terms of professional activities when there is an invited non-employment affiliation, for example, a visiting scholar, guest researcher, honorary fellow, etc. Membership, when someone is a member of a society, an association, working group, or similar. Service, a significant donation of time, money, or other resource, for example, volunteering for a society, or being part of a board, or being a reviewer for a funder or a journal, etc. And a distinction, which is an honorary or other award or prize in recognition of the researcher achievement. This can be, for example, a trophy, a medal, a poster that was awarded in a conference, etc. So there are different categories that can be classified here. When we talk to adding data to the ORCID record, we basically have different ways for data to get into ORCID. Of course, we have the record holder, the researcher using the ORCID interface, the normal interface you are already probably familiar with, and also member organizations have the possibility to use the member API via an integration that this organization might have, for example, with a CRIS system or repository or a HR system or any other platform. Or if you're a consortium member, you can use the Affiliation Manager as well. And the Affiliation Manager uses the API, but is an ORCID-hosted tool. So you don't need to have that implemented in your system, and you basically don't need additional IT resources for it. Today, what we are going to do is focusing on the Affiliation Manager, but we have sessions as well to discuss integrations that you can find on the ORCID On Demand. We have everything pre-recorded there. Validated information, so the information that is added by a member organization, is very useful because it provides a trust marker. And this trust marker indicates not only that this data is validated, but also the source of the information. So it can help in different process of decision making, of course. Every organization can add data to every single section of the record. However, we consider that research organizations are more likely to add affiliations because they are a trustworthy source of that data. Publishers might probably add outputs and reviews, and funders funding awards. Here you have two examples coming from Los Alamos National Library and Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv. The first one is added via an integration Los Alamos National Laboratory developed, and the second one uses the member portal, so the Affiliation Manager, the tool that we are discussing today. It is quite important that we focus on these trust markers because they also add some integrity to the research ecosystem and particularly to the record. So, for example, you see an affiliation here added by the University of Liverpool via the Affiliation Manager versus an affiliation added manually. So definitely the first one has an added value because of that trust marker. Of course, the more trust markers we have, the more trustworthiness we are going to have in the ORCID record. And you can see all these summarized also as part of the user interface. So the idea will be that as more ORCID members add data to ORCID records, the more robust that record is going to be, and then the entire scholarly record completely as well. And this is why we also have the Affiliation Manager to help you adding these affiliation data to ORCID records. So let's cover now specifically the Affiliation Manager and how to use it. This is a bit more practical, so we are going to go step by step, the different aspects of the tool and what you can find. In a big picture or overview, this is the Affiliation Manager, the workflow related to it. And as mentioned, you don't need previous IT knowledge or IT resources in order to use this tool. The tool works with a CSV file or a manual addition of affiliations. However, when you're working with a large number of affiliations, we definitely recommend that you use the CSV file. You will have a template, so you only need to complete the different fields and then upload the file to the portal. Then you have basically two options. Either you ask the tool to send notifications directly via the portal, or you download the permission links and merge that with an email merger, for example, and send it to your researchers, staff, scholars, whoever you are planning to target the Affiliation Manager to. They will need to go through the normal authentication process, and then the affiliation is going to end up in their ORCID records. So how to access the portal? First of all, the access is available through the member portal. You as ORCID members have access to the member portal, and then in the top menu on the resources, you will find apply for affiliation manager credentials. This sends you to a form that you need to fill in. You need to indicate that you are a consortium member and the name of your consortium lead. This is the organization leading your consortium. For example, Royal Society Tea Parangi, AAF, Axios, SSTL of Ukraine, etc. So the organization that leads your consortium. And then a email address for contact, of course. Once we receive this form, the access is approved, and you will receive also an email indicating that the access is there. And then again, on the top menu, you will see tools, and the first one will be the affiliation manager, so you will be able to access it. Once you are in the tool, you will see different options. The first one is add affiliations. This is a one-to-one manual input or editing option for the data. This option is recommended only when you're going to work with a small number of affiliations or you need to do only some specific edits. If not, what we recommend is to use the second option, which is import affiliations from a CSV. And this is where you're going to work with the CSV file. The next one is request affiliations for edit. So once you have uploaded a file or added affiliations manually, you can also download the affiliations that have been added in order to edit them. The difference here between importing a new file or requesting the file to edit is that in the second option, editing via CSV, you will have already the code for that specific entry and the affiliation. So when you modify that and upload the file again, only those entries that have been modified will have a modification or will vary. The rest will remain the same, and you avoid any duplications. What you're going to do is basically updating what's there already. Here, the last two options are request permissions links and send permission notifications. So these are the two options to send the permission links. The first one, request permission links, is basically that you download the permission links and then you use an email merger. We also have an affiliation email guide in case you would like to use this option and personalize the message that you are sending to your researchers. However, what we recommend is that you use the send permissions notification because that's easy and you will definitely only need to use the tool without any email merger. And when you send permission notifications via the affiliation manager, we send 3 reminders. So basically the first sending, then one after 7 days, and another one after 30 days after the upload. Course. These ones, the notifications that we send can't be modified. So are exactly the same for every institution. The only thing that is going to happen is depending on the language that you have configured in the interface, then the message will be sent in this language, English, French, Spanish, etc. Also, a reminder here is that whenever you send these permissions, if the email that you are using for the file is the same as the email registered with the ORCID ID, the researcher will receive a notification. If it's not the same, then an email will be sent. I will explain these in a couple of slides as well. And then the last one, this one in the middle, request affiliation status report. It's basically that you're going to be able to download a file with the different statuses the affiliation entry has in the portal. And I will cover this in a couple of slides as well. How is the manual addition one-by-one structure. So you will be prompted with this form, and here you need to enter the user email, the affiliation type, whether that's an employment, education, distinction, invited position, etc. The organization name, you can enter here the name as you wish. So you can enter the name in English, in another language, and also with all the characters, and the city, the country, the organization ID source, whether that's ROR, and then the organization ID, which is going to be the ROR ID of the organization. Most of organizations have already a ROR ID, Research Organizations Registry. If you don't have one, you can go to ROR.org and request one. And then you have also other fields like department, role title, URL, dates, and start and end date. We recommend that when you are adding affiliations, you also use the start and end date to indicate that the affiliations are current or not. And the fields that you see there added in red are the mandatory fields. The other are recommended but not mandatory. And the same applies for the CSV file that you can use to add affiliations in bulk. So the same fields that are mandatory in the form are also mandatory in this field, in this file, and the others are recommended, although non-mandatory. Please also note that for the role title, the department name, and the organization name, the character limit is 4,000. So you will definitely have space to write the title or the role or the department the way you want. So there is no character limitation. There is a template. This is the template that you can use and download, and there and on the top part you will see some instructions. However, before uploading the file to the Affiliation Manager, there are some things that we recommend in order to prevent errors, or not errors per se, but that the data is configured a bit weird. So first of all, check that the columns are separated by commas and not semicolons. This is something quite normal if you're using some spreadsheet software. Then when saving the file as CSV, the separators are semicolons. So please check that. Also, that the disambiguated organization identifiers are correct. In many cases as well, when working with spreadsheets, it can be the case that an additional unit is added to every single row. So particularly for the disambiguated organization identifier, they might sum a number and then it will be incorrect. So please double check that the organization identifier is exactly as it should be. Then check also that special characters or non-English characters like cedils or acutes haven't been modified by your spreadsheet software. So here, please check and save the files in UTF-8 encoding to facilitate that these don't end up being question marks or other symbols. And also check that no line breaks haven't been introduced by your spreadsheet software. That's a bit difficult to check sometimes, but there might be an additional line added, and this generates also error when processing the file, and it's difficult to check exactly the issue. Then the file is processed in the back end, and organizations will receive an email afterwards. So you import the file, and then you will receive an email similar to this one, indicating that everything was successful and you have a certain number of affiliations added or updated, or if there is a duplicate, then a certain number of duplicates have been ignored. You can have also a email like this indicating some errors. The errors are quite descriptive, so you might probably be able to identify the problem, but if not, please check with our member support at orcid.org. Normally, they are going to be related to the slide before, so double check this before uploading the file. Then all affiliations, when added to the member portal, will displayed as pending until an action occurs with the permission links. These actions can be if the member opts to send notifications from the affiliation manager. With that option, send permission notification, the status will move to notification sent. If members opt or send the permission links using an email merge with the other option, request permission links, then the status will change only when the researcher performs an action with the link. So when the researcher clicks there and authorize, then the status will be in ORCID. The status of the affiliation shows the status column shows the status of the affiliation in ORCID and the sending via the API once a change is made in the tool. This is once the researcher authorized the connection, then the status will be in ORCID. Then the researcher might delete the affiliation on the ORCID record or revoke permission for the affiliation manager. And if you try to perform a new action over that affiliation, then the status will update and display, for example, affiliation deleted or user revoked permission. You have a summary of the statuses also in the affiliation manager guide, indicating the status and the description. So what this means, for example, pending is that the user has not taken any action over the link. If that was sent via an email merger, then notification sent, for example, as mentioned, is basically that the user has received the notification, but they haven't clicked on it yet. In ORCID means that the user has granted permission and then the affiliation item has been successfully added to the ORCID record. And then you have other statuses as well, like the one mentioned, user deleted that affiliation from ORCID or user revoked permission. If you want that a user that revoked permission adds an affiliation, then you only need to send the permissions again. It is also very important when you work with the affiliation manager to understand also the researcher experience. So how the affiliation manager looks like from the researcher perspective. So when we send these notifications, etc. So first of all, remember, as mentioned, that there are two ways to send permission links. One option is ORCID sends the permission links. And here we have, if the email address that you added to the affiliation, either the CSV file or the manual form, matches the one registered with an ORCID ID, an inbox notification is sent. An ORCID record has an inbox on the top part where you will see a notification, so researchers will receive the notification there. If that email address doesn't match the one that is registered with an ORCID ID, then an email is sent to that address. And even if the second case, please note that no duplicate ORCID ID is generated in that process because users are going to log in with their credentials regardless the type of email or notification. The other option is that member sends permission links. And as mentioned, there is an option in the menu to download the permission links and send them via email to researchers using a email merger, for example. And you have here the affiliation manager email guide to illustrate a couple of details about the process and mention or explain to you what you can do if you decide to pick the email merger option. The notification, which is the first part, how they look like. So we have two options. The first one is that the user logs in ORCID records, and then they see the and then they see the notification in their inbox. This is the right one. And what they will see is the ORCID member portal would like to interact with your ORCID record and then, for example, adding a membership or adding an affiliation, employment, whatever. And then the researcher has the option to grant permission in that blue button. Also, depending on the configuration to receive emails from ORCID to their normal email, this is part of the record settings as well. Researchers will receive an email as well indicating, hey, you have a notification on your ORCID record. This is what this notification is about. So you have the permissions. ORCID member portal has asked for permissions to make changes to your ORCID record. And this is also an explanation which organization is working with the tool, and then the type of affiliations that are going to be added, employment and qualification in this case. As mentioned, these notifications are sent if the two email addresses are the same. Then you can also get the email notification directly, so through the email and not through the ORCID inbox. And this is how the notification looked like. So then these squares basically added in these screenshot represents the name of the organization. So basically that will be personalized with the name of your organization. However, the email per se, the text is standard. And researchers have the option to click on grant permissions as well. Then researchers will need to follow the usual authorization process when they click on grant permissions. So first of all, if they will need to log into the ORCID record. This is the reason why no duplicate is created. Or if they don't have an ORCID record yet, then they have also the option to register for one. So if they have already one, they just need to enter their credentials there or register if they don't have one. And then they are prompted with the normal authorized access page, where they will see their name, their ORCID ID, then the organization that is asking for permissions, and the permissions that are requested as well. So once the researchers follow the usual authorization steps with the previous authorization page, if they click on authorize access, then they will see a message saying, thank you, name of the researcher, you have successfully granted this organization permissions to update your ORCID record. And then if there is any issue, then contact ORCID as well. If they click on deny access, which is the other option, then they will have a message saying, oops, you have denied access, and therefore your ORCID record won't be updated. If that was a mistake, then they also have the possibility to grant access again, and they will go again through the authorization page. So this should be quite clear for researchers when they are working with the connection. And now that we have covered the part of how the tool works per se and how researchers see those notifications and the authorization process, there are some tips to use the Affiliation Manager successful based, as mentioned, on ORCID members' experiences. So in general lines, you need to check, or you need to think of the usage of the Affiliation Manager as any other integration. Here, what we need to consider is a plan, development, and launch. And we recommend that you engage with your community through the whole process so that researchers, for example, know that you're planning to use the tool, they understand what they are going to be asked for. You can even mention the process or the type of email they are going to get because you now have the information about that. And also explain to them why you're adding those affiliations or those professional activities. With that, researchers are prepared for the action, basically. Here, when we mention the plan, is also that you consider which type of affiliations you're going to add to ORCID records, and also with which group you're going to work. For example, if you're working with faculty in general, if you're working only with a group of researchers, if you're going to begin with a small group, for example, a specific school, and then you're going to expand to other, if you're going to work only with a group of invited scholars or with a group of reviewers, etc. And then the development part per se, it's easy because you only need to ask for ask for access, basically, to the affiliation manager, and then the launch, that moment when you upload the file and then the notifications are sent. Hopefully, through this process, your researchers know about the usage of the tool and what you're planning to do. In the planning phase, we also recommend you to figure out and establish a plan for updates. So how often you're going to update those affiliations, for example, with dates or when roles are changing. In general lines, good communications and community engagement guarantees that the uptake of the tool is successful. So again, communicate to your researchers your plans of using the affiliation manager in advance, and you might have different options to do that. You can use a blog post, maybe a small talk, for example, if you're working with PhD students, or interviews with deans or particular people at a university or at the organization. Also, avoid sending details about affiliations in ORCID record together with other institutional information. So, for example, as part of a welcoming email, because that information might end up being hidden, and then people won't access that information and won't know what you're talking about. So it is better to send kind of isolated, so to say, emails with this information. Provide your researchers with the contact detail of a designated ORCID support person at your organization. They can contact if there is an error. And here, I'm not referring to an error in the tool per se. If you get an error from the tool, ORCID is responsible for that. But if your researchers see that, for example, the wrong department has been added or the wrong date, then they can contact you to solve that problem. And as mentioned, elaborate a plan to keep the affiliation data updated. For example, if you check here the usage story of the University of Liverpool in the UK, which is pretty complete, then you will see that they have a plan to update affiliations every 3 months. So once a quarter, they are going to check if there are changes in that tool, in that affiliation entry that they added, and then update them as needed. With this, I want to thank you very much for your participation today. And of course, I'm open for questions regarding the tool, and also if you're using it already or you need help. I'm going to launch also a poll to understand a bit better your usage of the affiliation manager, if you're using it or not. Apparently I can't launch it, but that's not a problem. So please use the Q&A functionality to ask your questions, or you can ask your questions later as well. But I think it is a good option now to see if you have any issue, or if you have been working with the tool and you have experienced some problems, or if you have any concern about the tool, and then we can answer those questions live as well. I will give you some minutes to ask it. Also, maybe you would like to ask a question related to an integration that is not the affiliation manager, but that adds affiliations as well. And I'm happy to cover those. we have the first question. So how to start instructors' accounts manually, one by one, or bulk as a CSV? There are the options, right? So basically, you can start using the affiliation manager the way you prefer. There are two options, as you correctly indicate. You either create affiliations using the CSV, or you create them manually one by one. The main difference is that, of course, one by one is going to be more time consuming. So we recommend that if you are planning to upload a large number of affiliations, that you use the CSV option. If you are planning to test briefly the affiliation manager, for example, only with your ORCID record or with the ORCID record of a colleague, then the one by one option, the manual addition, might be sufficient. I hope these answer your question. And there is a follow-up questions on these. So the accounts, so to say, in the portal are only for the administrators in that institution. So the people responsible for ORCID, right? They will have access to the affiliation manager as well if they request. What is not possible is for researchers to go to the affiliation manager and create the affiliation themselves, okay? What they are going to do is accept the permissions when those permissions are sent. Here, there is another question, which is quite interesting. If someone is not working anywhere, can affiliation of this person, of her university, can be added, or the one of the last organization? So here, let's cover two things. When you're adding affiliations using the affiliation manager or any other tool that you are planning to add affiliations, for example, your research information management system or any other tool, the organization that is adding this data should be responsible for those affiliations. For example, if you work at the University of Liverpool, then you can only add affiliations that relate to the University of Liverpool. You can't add affiliations that relate to a university in Germany, for example, the University of Stuttgart. You can't do that. And the University of Stuttgart, in this case, they can add affiliations to researchers or students that aren't any longer in that institution. That's also possible. So, for example, you have a list of alumni and you would like to add an affiliation. You can do that. But always the affiliation or professional activity should be related to your organization. You can't add an affiliation that relates to another institution because you aren't responsible for that per se. I hope this works and this answers your question. Here we have another question. Is there a limit on the number of managers within the organization? The answer is no. So there is no limit. You can add as many managers or users in the portal as you wish. So there might be only one person or more than one. These people can be also from different departments. So there can be someone from the library, someone from the research office, someone from IT. That's absolutely no problem. However, what we recommend is that if you are planning to have different people adding different affiliations, for example, a person responsible for a certain faculty or a certain department is adding those affiliations, we recommend that you internally have a mini agreement so that these affiliations are going to be kept always updated, and you don't end up in a situation where someone added affiliations, then they left the organization, for example, they left the library, and then no one is responsible for those affiliations. So this is why we indicate to have a clear plan when you're using the tool. I hope this answer your question. Then we have another one. Thanks for the lively and interesting presentation. You're welcome. We are currently implementing Pure and would like to go live in spring 2025. Does it make sense for us to use the Affiliation Manager now, or should we manage the profiles via Pure? What are the advantages of the Affiliation Manager compared to Pure? This is a very good question. So when you say Pure, we can pick any other tool, any other CRIS system that also add data to an ORCID record. There is no advantage from one tool or the other. So basically, the two of them have the functionality to add data to ORCID records. However, if you are using already a CRIS system or RIM system in your institution, or you're planning to use one, what we recommend is probably that you use that tool, as you will have all the information in one place and researchers won't get confused. However, it is also important to notice that in some cases, not everyone in your organization is part of Pure or the CRIS system that you're using. Sometimes the CRIS systems are restricted to people that are employed in that institution. But for example, if you have PhDs that don't have a formal contract, like with a monetary exchange, or if you have invited professors, or if you provide some sort of distinction, that might not be included in your CRIS system, Pure or others. So in that case, you could use the Affiliation Manager as an alternative for those options. As an alternative for invited positions, education, or PhDs, distinctions, etc. But it's not that one tool is better than the other, or that you should use one and not the other. In your case, probably if you're planning to launch everything in spring 2025, I would wait until spring 2025 to have all the information at once. However, as mentioned, if you have some examples of people that are not going to be included in your CRIS, then you can use the Affiliation Manager for those. Here we have another question. Is there any way to add patents published to ORCID profile as Affiliate Manager? So the Affiliation Manager is only for affiliations and professional activities. So if a patent is a type of work, so you won't be able to add this at the moment using the Affiliation Manager. Patents can be added either manually by researchers selecting the work type patent, or by an institution that has an integration that writes data to the work section. This can be a repository, this can be a CRIS or RIM system, and sometimes also funding systems might have the capacity to write data to the work section. And also you can develop your own integration with ORCID and cover that part. But if you have questions in particular with working with works, then write a message to membersupport@orcid.org, and we can definitely answer that question as well in more detail with your particular case. Okay, that was a very good number of questions. I think we have even another one. Okay, in the Affiliation Manager, there are already some entries with confirmed ORCID IDs. Now I download the CSV and change some metadata, like the department name, and then upload it again. Are the verified ORCID IDs still there, or do I have to confirm them again, going back to pending status? Thank you very much. This is also a very good question. I tried to cover that when explaining the Affiliation Manager, but let me cover that a bit more in detail. Basically, when you request the CSV file for edit, you have there already the ORCID ID and also a code that represents that affiliation entry. If you modify in that CSV file a part of that affiliation, for example, you enter the department name and you upload the file again, then what the researcher is going to see, it's only that the affiliation has been updated. They will receive also notifications saying, this institution has updated this affiliation with this new department name, for example, and that's it. They don't need to go through the authentication process again, and you won't see the status pending again. Here is another question. Thanks for the nice presentation. You are welcome. And I'm in a startup and we're looking to become a member of ORCID, mainly for providing auth integration and reading, writing some data for users. What is the recommend process for integration and what are the fees for this? Given that I don't know exactly your case and the type of infrastructure that you are planning to use, it is better if you write a message to membersupport@orcid.org, and we will pick your answer, we'll pick your case from there. Basically, the recommended process for integration depends on the type of infrastructure you have. So if you have, for example, a repository or a CRIS system or a publishing system, it might depend there. Also, if you're using already a software that has some ORCID capabilities, or if you're developing the if you're developing the integration from scratch, so a custom integration, and the fees are detailed on our webpage. So if you go to info.orcid.org and you click on membership, then you will see there the fees for startups as well. But the best option is that you write a message with your case so that you can have a better orientation precisely on your case. We have another question here. When I use the affiliation manager and the user connects to it, verified ORCID ID, and I have a different system like a CRIS system, which is also using the member API, are both systems using the same dataset, or does the user have to connect with each system and there exist two different datasets? Even the member API, the university, even if the member API, like the university, is the same behind it? That's a very good question. So basically, the affiliation manager and, for example, a CRIS system, these are two different integrations. So they do have different API client ID and secret. The only thing is that for your CRIS system, we will send you those credentials. For the affiliation manager, we don't send you these credentials because everything is added directly to the portal. Researchers need to authenticate differently in each system, in the CRIS system and the affiliation manager. There is a particularity of the affiliation manager, and it's that it uses a technology that creates different access tokens when you are authenticating as a user. So this means that we can't share permissions that have been granted to the affiliation manager with, for example, a CRIS system. However, you can share permissions granted to a CRIS system to a repository or a journal platform, for example. But in the case of the affiliation manager, it works independently. Even, as you said, if the same organization is behind it. This is why we mentioned that it is important to have a clear case for each type of integration and analyze whether using the affiliation manager and the CRIS system at the same time makes sense, or if you prefer to go only with the CRIS system. Okay. But one thing that you can, of course, do is you have through the affiliation manager the verified ORCID IDs. You know that those IDs are verified. So if you are sharing metadata with, for example, the repository, then you can definitely tag them as authenticated ORCID IDs. And we don't have any additional questions, I think, here. Hopefully, I've answered all questions. Anyways, I'm leaving here in the chat the email address, member support@orcid.org. And if you write there, we can pick your question and answer it. And also, of course, you have the page, apart from the links that are added to this presentation, you have the page info.orcid.org, where you will find a lot of additional details regarding membership, regarding best practices per system, and of course, the documentation related to the affiliation manager as well. So I hope you enjoyed the session. You were able to have an answer for your questions, and we stay at your disposal for future interactions, and of course invite you to participate in other events like this one, to cover other questions of being an ORCID member. So thank you very much and see you soon.